to this episode of the YAHOWAH blog. It is devoted to the time of troubles, in particular Jacob's, Tsar, or Yisrael's troubles. This is a time that is fast approaching. It began 7 years before YAHOWAH and Dod returned on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah. And so the time of troubles commence on the 22nd of May, 2026, which is the Shabat upon which Shabuah will be fulfilled. And our last program, which was devoted to, I think, part 15 of Katsir harvest, we explained in detail specifically what Shabuah represents. Now what I'm going to do is turn to Isaiah 17 and 18, so that you might know the prelude to this Shabuah harvest, but also might appreciate what will transpire after it and where this will all end up. Because we're entering an exceedingly difficult time for God's people, where he is going to do everything he can to garner their attention, to reintroduce himself to them after 3,400 years of separation, so that a remnant of Israel might be spared. So there's a lot at stake. This is an exceedingly important time for YAHOWAH and his people. In our family hour, I shared the first 7 statements of what I'm going to reprise for you at the beginning of this program. And we need to do that so we are up to speed with where the story is headed and how we are going to get from here to there. It begins with the burden, the pronouncement concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus is corrupt, it is degenerate, and will be forcefully rejected and removed from among inhabited cities. She will become a twisted and tangled heap of rubble. Isaiah 17:1. This was really quite a prophecy when it was issued 2,700 years ago, because Damascus remains the longest enduring, continuously habitated city in the world. And as a result, to say that it's going to eventually be uninhabited and nothing but rubble is saying a lot. And this would not have even been conceivable until fairly recently during the Syrian civil war. And now with the Assyrian government folding, the military of Assad giving up and just fading into oblivion, and the terrorist group formerly known as the Islamic State gaining control of the country. Nor would you have imagined that a city like Damascus could be turned to rubble. But you look at how limited the Israeli use of air power was during the Gaza war. And yet Gaza is a demolition zone, to quote Donald Trump. It is a heap of ruins. And you look at the areas within Beirut that Israel had to bomb to take Hezbollah out, and even the suburbs of Damascus where the Russians bombed them to deter one militia against another. It doesn't take much to turn a city into rubble. We also saw this, of course, during World War II, where there are cities like Dresden, which the Allies, particularly the United States, firebombed night upon night, killing more people in one night than were killed in Gaza during the entire war, and leaving the city essentially abandoned. So this doesn't take much to do it today. But when this prophecy was made 2,700 years ago, it was pretty extraordinary. And we're just watching its fulfillment now. Abandoned and deserted will be the inhabited and terrorized regions of Aror, the repudiated outcast. This speaks specifically of where the Philistinians have gathered in Jordan. It's not too far from Amman, Jordan, and it is an area where YAHOWAH says it's just going to be terrorized. It is going to be filled with repudiated outcasts, And they are. There are 2 million misguided, malcontent Muslims in Jordan who still, for political and religious reasons, apart from evidence and reason, of course, identify as Palestinians, even though there are no such ethnicity, no such country. But they view themselves as outcasts from Israel when they are actually outcasts from the mainstream of Islam. They are so irascible that no one wants them. And they are largely terrorists. And what God is saying is that there will be an uprising in these areas, and that Muslim will fight against Muslim. It was the old prophecy that that they will live like wild asses of men. Their hands will be raised against a brother, a brother's hand against a brother, and they will live in hostility with the whole world. Pretty accurate depiction of the descendants of Ishmael, which are today's Muslims. For there will be roaming animals fighting and militant militias along with their helpers. This is Adar, and that is, of course, what we would expect to happen here. It has happened before. It will happen again. The Muslims that are surrounding Israel have, who you would think they would have learned, that in their wars in 1948, 1967, and 1973, where they used conventional military hardware to fight a reasonably conventional war against Israel, they lost badly. Even though Israel was outnumbered 100 to 1 and they had better equipment by far and a common language where Israel had none of these advantages, nonetheless, the united Muslim force was defeated resoundingly by Israel with vastly inferior numbers, vastly inferior hardware. It's probably the greatest story in human history militarily of a force inferior in both numbers and in equipment defeating a superior adversary. And so this is what they have learned, is that while they cannot prevail against Israel mano a mano, man to man, or even in a standard warfare tactics, they are quite good at what happened on 10/7, where you send in an aerial bombardment into the cities, while jihadists by the thousands, and next time it will be by the millions, invade and wreak havoc in the smaller communities. And this is precisely what Yahowah is predicting is going to happen. He not only predicted 10/7 of 23, he is predicting 1,000 times 10/7 to occur in 2027. So 4 years removed from the first attack. And it's the thing that we have learned the IDF cannot thwart. They didn't even engage for up to 18 hours. And when they finally did engage in Gaza, they ended up manufacturing more Islamic jihadists than they killed. The IDF's not good at this kind of fighting. It's not to say they aren't courageous. I admire the IDF. The soldiers of the IDF, I think the leaders of the IDF are dunderheads, but the average soldier in the IDF is an extraordinary human being, and I admire their dedication to protect Israel. And while they fought nobly in Gaza, the mission they were given was impossible. It was a mission due to fail, because no matter how many Islamic jihadists they killed, they would manufacture more than they eliminated, and that is precisely what had happened, and I predicted it on the morning of 10/7 of 23. But anyway, this is going to happen in Oman. There's going to be a rise in the number of terrorists that come to attack Israel. And then it reads, but they will cease and prostrate themselves because there will be no one left to terrorize. Eventually, in both Syria and in Jordan, there will be an end to the internal infighting because they will have beaten each other to a pulp. And so they'll just go back to prostrating themselves to their wannabe God. So the defensive structures will disappear. So thinking Israel is safe, I had between the buzzer bombs and the systematic elimination of Hezbollah leaders, the systematic elimination of Hamas's leadership, not knowing that Hamas was simply a symptom of the bigger problem of Islam. Israel, I'm sure, thinks that they're relatively safe and they can let down their guard to some degree. And they're going to let down their guard even further because of the promises, even though they are insane, by Donald Trump. But nonetheless, the defensive structures, both in Israel, will be let down in terms of a jihadi attack. And this is suggesting that actually the defensive structures within Syria and Jordan will disappear. And that could happen very easily in the sense of Israel has already wiped out, fulfilling part of this prophecy, the defensive structures in Syria. When, right after this war happened, after the Islamic State took over Syria, they went in and unopposed, they bombed the Syrian military structure out of existence. And they could do the same thing with Jordan's in a couple of days' time, and may do so, particularly if there's another upheaval of militant jihadists in Jordan. This says this will happen on account of Ephraim. Ephraim is the northern kingdom, so the perpetrator here that is going to be the one that takes advantage of the relative appearance of weakness militarily in Jordan and in Syria will be Israel, particularly in defense of the northern territory of Israel. And it says that this will occur with the government out of Damascus, including a remnant of Aram Syria, being similarly dense and burdensome. So, yeah, Israel is going to view that the terrorist gang, the Islamic jihadists that took over Syria, and those that will gain power in Jordan, particularly if Trump gets his way and builds the Emerald Cities of Oz for Fakistinians, that Israel needs to know that while their defenses are down and they remain burdensome, that it's time for Israel to take them out. And Israel is going to do so. It's just not going to turn out the way they had hoped, because it wasn't a military attack in the traditional sense with airplanes and tanks that the Muslims were going to use next time. They're going to reprise the success from their mind, although it was savage, of 10:7. And it says the children of Israel will actually continue to exist prophetically, declares Yahowah, of the vast array of spiritual messengers and envoys. And while that is true, according to the other prophets, 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die over the next 8 years. So a remnant will survive. That is true. And that's good news. But many Jews are going to die in the process, because the next 7 years represents the time of Israel's troubles. And it will all, the prophet goes on, and it will actually come to pass in that day that the size of Jacob, which is Israel, will be decreased to the point of no longer being sustainable or viable. What he's talking about here is what I call the 2-state dissolution. It is a Muslim final solution for their Jewish problem. It is what is a suicidal notion, if you're a Jew, of giving the heart of Israel to the Islamic jihadists, creating a terrorist state within that will be used strictly to amass weapons and to attack Israel from the inside, while the large groups of mujahideen, Muslim jihadists, attack Israel from all sides, from the east and the west, the south and the north. Now they will also be able to attack from the inside out. It, with a state the size of Israel, it renders really every form of military defense unusable, because there are no battle lines. When you're being attacked by a state that's very close to the size of your state, carved right through the heart of your state where 78% of the people live, and then you're being attacked on both sides, both by aerial bombardments and by massives of jihadists, and from the north, the south, the east, the west, and then from the inside out, there is no place to create a defensive border. If a tank is facing one way, it's being attacked from the other. If a aircraft is bombing in one direction, it's the rockets are going over it and to another. And it's going to be hellish. What this is, of course, affirming is that when Gabriel, Dode, God's most capable and courageous man, predicted this in Babel to Daniel, he said that a treaty would be affirmed with many. And that peace treaty affirmed with many is likely a variation of UN 242. And while Muslims would have taken nothing less than the old 1967 lines prior to the Six-Day War, because of the Trumpsters' insane plan of the Gaza resort and the Emerald cities of Oz for Fakistinians in Jordan and Egypt, and that is such anathema to the Muslims who wanted this dagger kept in the heart of Israel. They're going to be more generous into what they will accept initially in terms of their state, and Trump and Israel collectively are going to accept that. And of course, the deal is only to make Israel vulnerable. It's going to be done in the spirit of YAHOWAH from the Muslim point of view, which means that no treaty between a Muslim and non-Muslim is binding on the Muslim. That's exactly how the 9th Surah of the Quran begins, and it's all because of the Treaty of YAHOWAH, where Muhammad said that he promised not to terrorize his own kin, his extended family, that he wouldn't rape their daughters, kidnap their sons, murder their fathers, rob their caravans for 10 years. And the next year he had more men under arms. He was in a better position to wipe them out. And he came and attacked them. And Allah conveniently said, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he agreed to. Any treaty between a Muslim and non-Muslim is not binding on the Muslim. This is what's going to happen. Israel's going to be lured into, isn't it going to be wonderful? We're going to have normalization now with Saudi Arabia, and they're the leader of the Islamic world. And we're all going to get along, and they're not going to want to kill us anymore. And they might even like us going forward. And it's just a ploy to establish you talk about a multi-front war. Well, this is a multi-front war up close and personal, inside out and outside in, all simultaneously. Donald Trump will be the purveyor of this. It'll happen within less than 2 years from now. So he's the president of the United States. He's the person coordinating this. It will be, the plan will be accepted, will be MBS's plan. He is a psychopath. And he represents Islam, which has been at war with Jews for 1,400 years. So this is what you can expect. The prophet went on to say, the fattest, best protected, and most important place of his physical existence will be leaned. It's going to be narrowed at the waist. That Israel is only like 5 miles wide is what it will be left when this state of terror is imposed on it, and therefore Israel become indefensible. Then it will be like, then this is what happens simultaneous with this, so that we now know the timing. We know when the Shabuah harvest, which is what's spoken of next, is going to occur, which is 7 years before Yahweh's return with Dode, the Messiah, in year 6000 Yah. He's returning on October 2nd, 6:22 p.m. In 2033, which is Yom Kippurim. And therefore, the Shabuah harvest, which is what this is talking about, which means sevens, is 7 years prior to that date and 7 years prior to 2033. And on the fulfillment date for Shabuah, you're at May 22nd, 2026, which is 15 months away from this particular recording in February of 2025. And therefore, Donald Trump will be president of the United States at this time. He is the responsible person for leaning Israel at the waist, playing Neville Chamberlain and taking the world into world war. So simultaneous with this, so we have our bearings, it will be like the gathering in and receiving, the joining together and bringing in, the collecting and assembling of a katsir, a harvest of reaping the fruit from the chaff at the proper season. I did the last program on episode 15 of Katsir Harvest, and one of the things that we learned, and it was emphasized from one of our covenant leaders, who is an old farm boy, he says, when it comes harvest time, that's the time that we go to work. And indeed, that is what Yahweh was calling us to do, is to roll up our sleeves and go to work. There's a lot to accomplish, very little time to accomplish it. Yahweh needs to be reintroduced to his people. His son needs to be acclaimed as our Messiah and the Son of God. And these dates need to be established so Israel knows what's going to happen, when and where, who's going to attack them, who can protect them. So this is a katsir harvest of standing grain in the field and on the stalk of kamah. And what we learned is that the sickle actually applies to the first fruit harvest. So this is a standing up, if you will, of those who are established, still in the field, ready to bear fruit, called kamah. And then his Zeroah. Zeroah is one of the most important terms in Hebrew. The most important title ascribed to David. He is first thought of being the Melech of Yisrael, and he is the former and returning Melech king, leader of Yisrael. But he is also Hamashiach. He is the one anointed 3 times by men at Yahweh's behest, and once by Yahweh himself. So he is the second of the 3 Zeroah, and that Zeroah indicates in his case that he served as the sacrificial lamb, which is how Zeroah is defined in the Torah. Moshe was the first Zeroah, as the strong arm of God that helped drag the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim, kicking and screaming. And I am the third Zeroah, one who is cultivating the harvest of Shabuah and Teruah. And Zeroah conveys all of these things. Its verbal root is zera. Zera means to sow and cultivate seeds to produce a productive harvest. Oh, and his Zeroah will reap the harvest with unfolding implications. So this series that we've been doing surrounding this program is called Katsir Harvest. This is Katsar. Katsir was used previously. Katsar is a variation of it. It is a time of reaping with unfolding implications as a verb in this case. And what is being reaped is first fruits. And overflowing, it says, torrent moving swiftly from one place to another in linear fashion as a result of the stem off the main branch and the promise of 7. It's shibolim. Shibolim would be the plural of shibol. Sheba would be 7 or promise. So this is all in that same root family. I think I have extrapolated in previous programs and talked about it being a river of light. Well, it does speak of a flowing torrent. It doesn't say if that river is moving upwards, downwards, or sideways, but this could very well depict, how fields in the wind, so fields undergirded by the Spirit would have a sense of movement and fluidity and flowing. This could also speak of that torrent of water that is going to upwell from the Temple Mount during Teruah and the importance of it. This could also speak of many people fulfilling Shabuah by bringing the voluntary amounts of water, the solvent, with them, and that this contributes to that flow. But the fact is, we're dealing with grain upright on the stalks. They are moving. It's almost like a river of grain flowing in the wind, which is ruach in Hebrew. In addition, there will be a time certain which is similar to a gleaning of what is left, a final collection and ingathering. So we have this Shabuah harvest, which is described visually here, a time of working in the field to maximize the productivity of that. And then a time certain is going to come, and when there's going to be a gleaning, which is different than the katsir. This is a lakat. An lakat is a secondary harvest. It is one which is done more rapidly. It gleans a remnant. It is designed to produce a numerically insignificant ingathering compared to the bigger prior harvest. And it's typically ascribed to things like olive trees, where you'd have the main harvest and then you'd come back sometime later. You'd notice there's some more ripe berries on the tree. You actually beat the tree to knock them off, and there would be a secondary harvest. That's what this is talking about. That's what a lakat is. So in addition, there will be a time certain, that which is similar to a gleaning of what is left, and a final collection and ingathering lakat, again of first fruits, flowing from one place to another in linear fashion. Now, in this particular case, this first fruits that is flowing could speak of one or two things. It could speak of the ongoing work of the ripe grain in that field that is put into action by the Spirit and continuing to move in the right direction. Or there is an aspect of Shibolim, which speaks of fruit on outstretched branches, which are also blown in the breeze. And so it could also speak of those. But there is a first fruits harvest, and it's a sense of movement from one place to another. And this speaks of that one occurring in the profound depths of Raphaim, where the sick have been healed and the defective have been restored, while the feeble falter and the souls of the dead remain. Emek, Raphaim. It is from the vast and open places where the depressed have been healed by a physician, from Rapha, a place where the impaired have been restored to health, and Rapha, where the feeble continue to falter and are left to descend from a higher place to a diminished status as a result of being lazy and limp, habitually refusing to exert the effort required to prevail. Sounds like he's talking about Haredim here. The Raphaim is a broad and an open valley. It's 2 miles west, if you're looking for a particular location, southwest of the Temple Mount and Jerusalem. So this is close to home that this action is taking place. It says, so he will remain. Now, this must be speaking of the Zeroah, who was identified in the previous statement, enduring being left behind as flesh and blood, for having caused people with physical bodies to be spared as a remnant. This is Sha'ar. Then acting as Ken and a close relationship, he, speaking of the Zeroah, will stay behind, his body serving as a reminder for the remainder of the extended family who are still leavened, a remnant of blood relations left over, and remaining as physical beings. It is written identically as Sha'or, which is to tell you that those who are left behind will be mostly leavened, which means they still have traces of their religiosity and their politics, which is why they did not participate in the Towrah gleaning. It is similar and written the same as Sha'ar, a remnant, a remainder, and a residue, with Sha'ur, a physical body comprised of flesh and blood, a corporeal mass of meat, and a blood relative. It was written in the Nifl perfect third person masculine singular, where the subject, who is the Zeroah, has been cultivating the fruitful harvest and producing this gleaning, and he's going to carry out and endure the action, which is to be left behind himself while causing others to remain in physical bodies based upon the choices he has made. And it ends by saying during this time, during this Towrah lakat. Thrust aside and left on the stems and branches, as would be the case as with an olive tree when it is beaten from all around to shake off some of the fruit, 2 or 3 berries in the top and most critical and foremost branch, who speak, promise, relate vocally, 4 or 5 in the clefts of his crag, his branches, which have been broken off of the fruitful and productive heifer, the parar of the one cultivating a flourish and abundant harvest on behalf of future generations, prophetically, declares Yahweh, God of Yisrael, of individuals who engage and endure with God. You know, Christians and Muslims don't much like to quote with the prophets and even what is written in the Torah, that Yahweh is the God of Yisrael. He happens to be the only God in the universe, but he identifies himself with his chosen people, Yisrael. So there's some pretty powerful insights here. It speaks of now an olive gleaning, but the realization that there's going to be a lot of olives that are not going to be knocked off the branches, that the branches themselves may fall, and we're going to see what's going to happen in that in a moment. But this is going to be a rough time. And so it is the Zeroah that's orchestrating this, of the remnant who did not survive and who are both religious and political. He is now working with them to prepare them for Yahweh's return. There's a lot to happen, only 10 days to get it done. And almost all of it has to transpire in the next 24 hours. So thrust aside and left on the stems and branches, as would be the case with an olive tree. That's why we call this an olive harvest. This is strictly for Yisrael and Yehudim. And it is the way that olives are harvested from a tree. They take branches and they beat the tree with the branches. And the choder, who is the other name for what I'm doing, particularly in Yashaya, it's a branch. It's a stem off the main branch. And so I'm walking away at the tree. I'm not trying to hurt the tree. I'm not trying to hurt the berries. I'm trying to get them off before, so that they can be prepared, so that they can be restored to health, so that they can be cleansed and ready for the return of Yahweh. And they would be incinerated if this didn't happen. So, and I'm also trying to strike some sense into their heads. Jews have been really hard-headed for a long time. Sometimes you got to get their attention. And so with only 10 days left, I'm sure there's some of that going on as well. And, Yahweh didn't pick a passive individual to do this. I got no problem getting in their face and yelling at them. Just, if he was looking for this, he got it. He found the right guy to do this. I'm no nonsense when it comes to telling people, you're absolutely stupid. You need to wake up. You're comatose. You're within days of blowing it. It's now or never. Get your act together. I probably wouldn't say quite those nice words, but nonetheless, you get the gist. I come across as poorly if I get all agitated on a program like this. But I can assure you I will not come across poorly when I'm agitated at this remnant of Yisrael, because I will have their best interest at heart. I will be the only one other than my pal Elia that will have their best interest at heart. And I can tell you, Elia's far sharper with his words than I am. So if you think I'm a little aggressive, well, wait till you get a load of Elia. And the fact is that Elia's grand role that he will reprise, and the whole reason he was taken and will return, is because he's the best ever when it comes to repudiating Israeli politics and religion. That's what he did previously. Something to think about. So thrust aside and left on the stems and branches, as would be the case when an olive tree is beaten from all around to shake off some of the fruit and shake some sense into them. Now, 2 or 3 olive berries. This is likely, I would think 2,000 or 3,000. I think that 1 represents 1,000 here. I could be optimistic and say 10,000. I could be super optimistic and say, 200,000 or 300,000. Wouldn't that be lovely? But I can tell you for sure it is not 2 or 3 million. But it could be 2,000 or 3,000. It could be 10 or 20 or 30,000. Optimistically, I guess it could be 200 to 300,000 olive berries in the top, most crucial and foremost branches. This would be, when you're dealing with the branch that Yahweh considers to be the uppermost, the foremost branch of the children of Israel. I shouldn't have to tell you who that is. Well, Doda is the main branch, but the tribe is Yehudim. Yehudah, and the plural, Yehudim. That is what this 2 to 3 represents. So 2 to 3 olive berries in the top, most critical and foremost branch. Then I've got a special rapport with Yahowah, and you might say, well, that's kind of hard. He passed away 2,700 years ago. No, he didn't. He wrote the book on chodering. He introduced the choder. He explained how to be a choder. He told me everything the choder needs to know and to do. He's the guy that also tells Israel that you need to listen to the choder and read the sign that he has provided for you. And occasionally, because quite frankly, Yahowah is way too over the top in his praise of the job that I'm doing and his appreciation for this job. And you have to know the reason for that. Yahowah was really the greatest of all prophets in terms of the swath of material that he represented. Yahweh credits Moshe with being the greatest prophet, but he explains that because he liberated the children of Israel from Mitzrayim. In all of his greatness, and Yahowah, which means deliverances from Yahweh, has the most refined vocabulary of any prophet. He covers the widest swath of territory of time from any prophet. He makes the most detailed presentation of the time that we're in now. But when he was given a chance as a reward for a job well done to enter heaven and to see Yahweh and in the seventh dimension, and then Yahweh opened the door to heaven to show him what was on the other side, and I'm sure Yahowah expected that all the marvelous things that Yahweh had revealed through him, that there would be just countless people on that door waiting to come in based upon what they had revealed together, and there was no one. And there was not only no one out the door waiting to come in, based upon all that Yahowah had said and done. He had already prophesied there would be no one for the next 2,700 years. No one. And so that's pretty defeating. Yahowah broke down in tears. And this is a great man doing a great service. And the realization that he had given it his all and not a single person responded. Yahweh took him then to see the future, see our time right now. That's what he's writing about here. And now he knows that there would be a Nakri, an observant foreigner, the choder as he describes him, a sucker that would give life to the fallen stump that was Israel, a Kol, the voice speaking for Yahweh, Bashar, the herald of Yahweh's beloved son, Dod. And as the final Zeroah, gleaning this harvest, and that much of what he would say would come out of the words that Yahowah wrote, making Yahowah not only a great prophet, but as the one who delivered these results. He's the one who provided the textbook that explains what we are doing. And so he enjoys much of the success and deserves much of the credit. And now he knows that it wasn't for naught, that everything he said bore fruit, just at a different time. And so Yahowah is so thrilled that his words finally resonated with his people, and his people finally listened, and they came back home, that Yahowah has a tendency to be a bit exuberant as it relates to the role that Yahweh has enabled me to play vis-a-vis this textbook written by Yahowah. So he's a little over the top. In this particular case, in the style of Elia, he gives me a little jab, and that's what I just wanted to say. Is this what he's saying? Is this vocal branch is one who speaks a lot. He's a bit verbose, makes a lot of promises relating to the people, but nonetheless, it's an okay guy. It's just he just may be a wee bit verbose. You know, if you look at the book of Yahowah, which I've covered 90% of the book of Yahowah, I look forward to covering the remaining 10%. But you know, the book of Yahowah in a standard font, standard print is, you know, about this thick, and you know, I've written 36 of these. So when he gives me a jab and say, okay, he's a really talkative stick, I represent that statement. What can I say? I do appreciate his humor, and he has every right to make the claim. You know, if Yahowah wanted a man of few words, he'd have found a man of few words. Goes on to say 4 or 5 in the clefts of his crag, from the branches which have been broken off. Now, the branches which have been broken off for Israel, the 10 tribes were taken away from their union with Yehuda and dispersed. And so they are the branches that were broken off. The reference to crag is that Yahowah knows my birth name. My given name is Craig. And so it means the crag of a rock, the fissure of a rock. And fissure of a rock is not a pejorative in Hebrew. It is from a crag, a rocky crag, that the fiery light of Yahowah emerged and revealed, where God revealed himself to his people. It is a crag that is where the Torah was revealed. It was this rocky crag up there at the summit of Mount Towrah. And it is a crag that is sharp and divisive and cutting, which is what Yahowah wants us to be. You know, as I said, he didn't pick somebody that's Pollyanna that wants to everybody get along and let's all sing Kumbaya. No, well, sing Kumbaya, it means to stand with Yah, but nobody else knows that. So that is the reference to Craig here. And it's also another inside joke and a jab at all of us. And this is such a marvelous time for Yahowah that I'm sure this was his moment where he was laughing. But no one seems to understand why Yahowah had a problem with Moshe striking the crag that gave forth water as opposed to speaking to it. Well, it is the water that is released under the Temple Mount, under my Bashar corporal body that is sacrificed for the cleansing and the return, preparation of Yisrael, this final remnant. And so, as Eliah will do magnificently, you're supposed to talk to the rack. And if you talk to the talkative crag, good things happen. If you whack him, bad things happen. And Moshe decided that he would whack it. And that's not Yahweh's idea. He doesn't want the crag whacked. He wants us to communicate and with the crag, and it will do exactly as it's supposed to do. So it's another inside metaphor. I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, other than I find great humor and pleasure and these nuances. I know my God has a sense of humor. I know his favorite prophet has a sense of humor. I know his son has a sense of humor, and I have a sense of humor too, and I like to share it. So anyway, I'll be protecting these. That's another way he could be saying too, with the crags and broken off branches, that maybe I'm really old by that time too. That could be another inside joke. Who knows? The last part of it though was no joke. This part of it was one of the most cathartic moments of my life when I realized what he said next. Because the Zeroah, that talkative stick, the one with the clefts and crags, would be the parah. You could just render parah as fruitful and productive. But parah is the Adamah parah, the bloody red man, who is fruitful, productive, known as the red heifer. And so what he's saying is that the aftermath of the Towrah gleaning, the sun rises that following day as it relates to those who are left behind, including the Zero himself, who will be corporeal on that day, that he is the red heifer. He is the Parah. He is also the bloody red man of Edom, the man of Edom, which Yahowah will talk about in great detail. I think it's in the 61st chapter. After he goes back and talks about this very harvest, both of these harvests, in the 56th and 57th chapter, he reveals the arrival of the man of Edom. The man of Edom is the ultimate savior for the remnant of God's people. The Dode is the ultimate savior of God's people. But at this moment in time, it is the man of Edom. And the man of Edom and the Anima Parah are one and the same. Prophetically declares Yahowah. So here I am giving my buddy Yahowah credit for the humor. But if you read this quite literally, it's Yahowah, my God, that is having some fun with me and the terms that he has used over the time. Now, I will tell you, if it is true that this was not, and it both can be true, by the way. Yahowah could be just dictating to Yahowah writing it down. The other is that a lot of prophecy is revealed such that Yahowah wants it filtered through someone he trusts. And because if he does that, then we're receiving the information in a way that is more ideal, more customized, if you will, for us. And so this could be Yahowah having fun with this, but it could be Yahowah knowing that our relationship is good enough that he can have some fun with all of this. Because if you don't see the humor in it, well, it would be this particular moment is pretty dark. It is right before the light. And this says that the Almighty is the one who will have acted and engaged to get this done with him. Talking about the Zero again, the crack. That the individual, like every individual in God's story, is nothing apart from God. Moshe is a former Egyptian, whisked out of a basket and then who ran off to Arabia that we had never would have heard from. We would never have even known his name had Yahowah not engaged to accomplish the liberation of his people and the revelation of the Torah through them and the guidance of his people to the promised land. All of that is because of what Yahowah did with him and through him. Same thing would be true with Dode, the greatest man who's ever lived, Yahowah's beloved son, our Messiah and King. If it were not for what Yahowah did with him and for him, we would not know that he was the king of, he wouldn't have been the king of Israel. Yahowah picked him. People picked Shaul. He would not have won any of his battles, most all of his battles. He would never have figured out that it was appropriate for him to serve as the Pesach El, which he did. And he could not have done that if God had not brought him back for a second of his 3 lives. And he could not have fulfilled Matzah, where he took our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there without Yahowah orchestrating the entire affair. And he would still have stayed there if it wasn't for Yahowah bringing him out of Sheol and taking him to Shamayim. Everything we know about Dode, we know because of what Yahowah did with him and through him. Now, the same thing would be true with me, although I don't want to pretend that I'm of the character or the courage or the intellect of either of those 2 prior Zeroah. But nonetheless, Yahowah chose me to do this mission, so he had a reason. And he intends to achieve his purpose. And so Yahowah is saying, don't count any of this out. Just because you may not like who God chose, he's going to accomplish it through his chosen implement. That's why we read constantly, don't get in his way. So Yahowah will engage, he will act, and he's going to get this done. And his eyes will choose to continually look towards the set apart one of Yisrael. You know who the set apart one of Israel is? This is, by the way, Yeshayah 17:7. Do you know? Who is the set apart one of Israel? It's Dod. Yahweh declares that in the 89th Mizmor, which is the most important song ever written. Dod is the set apart one of Israel. And so he's speaking of this Zeroah, who God is working through to accomplish all these wonderful things. And yet he says the Zeroah's eyes are focused on Dod. Now, why would he be focused on Dod and not Yahweh, who's doing all these things through him? Why not the rest of Yahweh's people? Because he's doing it all for Dod. Because Dod did all of it for us. And the way back home, the way to capitalize on all of this opportunity is for us to embrace who Dod is and what he has accomplished. Dod is the one through whom Yahweh established the covenant. He shared the narrative presenting the terms and conditions with Abraham. He established it, according to the 89th Mizmor, with Dod. Dod is Yahweh's son. If we want to understand the covenant, Dod is our exemplar. If we want to be beloved of Yah, we emulate Dod. If we want to enter heaven, become immortal, perfected, and adopted into God's family, we capitalize on what Dod has done because he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. If we want to be part of forevermore, we acknowledge Dod because he is king of forevermore. And so you should not be surprised that I was the first one to learn and then to share that Dod is the Messiah, the Son of God, and a returning king, who also fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, collectively making these discoveries the greatest in human history and a direct fulfillment of this part of the prophecy, because all of those things were unknown, particularly collectively, prior to what I discovered and have shared with you. Dod is the set apart one, the most special and uncommon, the only one of him in all of Israel. So then he will never accept, never gaze upon the altars, these works of the hands representing the fingers that have made them, and they will not focus upon either that which is associated with the Asherahs, the mothers of God, the queens of heaven, or the Masana, Madonnas with the child, or the sun god images. Yeshayah 17:8. What he's saying here is that because I am focused on what Dod has done, and the best way to serve Yahweh, the best way to earn Yahweh's respect, the best way to do what Yahweh wants us to do is to focus on what his son achieved. Because everything falls into place when you understand that. And if you do that, then you will never have to endure anything that, or accept anything that is the least bit religious. There is no altar to bow to, no works of man that become impressive. And you're actually part of those who get to remove them. This actually says, because the ultimate trophy to human achievement, religious achievement, are the Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mosque, currently scarring the Temple Mount. And what I've done with Yahweh is, honestly, I'm going to serve as the second witness, no matter what. You've asked me to do it. That is a job I'm going to do. I'm going to serve as the Adama Parah. But you've never been opposed to those asking. You're asking to do something like this, for them asking something from you. Mind you, this is not if you don't, I won't, because I will, regardless if he said no. This is Yahowah telling me in advance. 2,700 years ago, I agreed to this. I don't want to stand on the Temple Mount speaking to Yisrael with those ugly pieces of crap in my background. I don't want that Dome of the Rock. I know it's an ugly scar. I don't want Alaska Mosque. I want those religious shrines gone. I don't want to have to look at them. And yeah, I was accommodating that. He says, yeah, I'll take care of you. They will be destroyed. Thank you. Would I have done it any? Yes. Am I going to feel better about it? Absolutely. Am I going to feel more comfortable there? You betcha. And if Muslims and progressives and whoever wants to blame me for attacking their holy sites, great, bring it on. You think that I get irritated on some things that maybe are a little over the top? Hey, bring that to my attention and see how I respond at the time. It'll be entertaining. And it also says that they, now speaking of a larger audience, will not focus on the Asherahs. And I just love this because, part of being in this role is that Yahowah makes it pretty clear you're gonna get your stripes. Look at Dode; he was beaten to the point of being a crimson grub on the fulfillment of Pesach, what Rome did to him with their whips, and then nailing him to the upright post for crucifixion. And the presentation here is I'm going to be a bloody red mess when I offer my life to the Beast of Beasts on Yom Kippurim, on Towrah. You got to be able to take your stripes to do this job. And you'll have a lot that won't be physical stripes. And the most aggressive that I have felt in recent months goes back to a rebellion that came out of the group that was the most supportive of this mission. And it was a woman who was clinically diagnosed as a psychopath that lured away most of the women, few of the men. I'm not sure if they're really men or not, but nonetheless, a few of them, but mostly women. And she did so in a mother god worship cult, an Asherah cult. That mother god is the chief object of veneration, and they speak for mother god. Of course, in Yahowah's testimony, there is no mother god. He denounces the idea of mother god by saying there's not going to be any focus on Asherah's mother gods at this time. So he's officially denouncing it and denouncing that breakaway group and saying, no, you missed the vote. You're not going to be part of going forward. And all things to do. What was interesting is that in all of human history, no one made a bigger deal about the fact that ruach, the Hebrew word for spirit, was feminine. And if anything, anytime something was feminine and it had to do with the Moed Mikre of the covenant, I would speak of all the possible implications of this word being feminine. And if anything, well, not if anything, I absolutely went too far in ascribing feminine characteristics to this aspect of Yahowah's nature. And it was always, though, an aspect of Yahowah's nature that he has both feminine and masculine qualities, but Yahowah always represents himself as masculine, never as feminine. And their great claim was, well, because you have understated the feminine nature of Spirit Mom, many people are going to die, so we need to speak for God so that those people aren't blinded by you, and they know that we're representing the voice of Spirit God. Of course, no one in human history ever did more to ascribe feminine characteristics to the Ruach, and therefore to Yahowah. So the very premise, of course, was a lie, but people in these breakaway cults are never much concerned about things that are dishonest, nor the worship of sun god images as it goes. So with these revelations pertaining to what's going to happen around Shabu and Towrah, the end gatherings presented, all in chronological order. I think now we're moving to as we move to the next statement, Yahweh wants us to go back and say, okay, I've shared these events with you from the perspective of the fulfillment of Shabuah and Towrah, and what's going to happen then. Now I want to go back through the same turf, but I want to now share it with you from the perspective of the battles that Israel's going to have to wage and what's going to occur during this process. That's where we begin now. He says, in that specific day, it shall come to be that the cities of his refuge and his defensive fortifications shall be abandoned and deserted, consistent with an occult present among the religions and the merchants of death. And then the uppermost branch of the olive, therefore, will be completely deserted for a time because of the presence of the children of Israel. Then there will be appalling desolation and stupefying ruin. Yeshua 17:9. Indeed, because you have completely ignored and have actually forgotten, becoming ignorant of the God of your salvation and deliverance, and the rock, the shore, of your protection and refuge, you do not remember or mention. This could be, again, the rocky crag who has been seeking to protect you, providing refuge for you, is the memorable man that you fail to acknowledge. Therefore you plant and embed and erect the vines and dwellings of Adonis, the Lord. That's not good because the Lord is Satan. You continually sow it. This is what you are, Zerah, sowing, as an illegitimate, unauthorized, and loathsome means of estrangement via a vine or branch that, fortunately, needs to be pruned. 17:10. In that day, you will grow then and carefully construct a barrier around your garden. How'd that do in Gaza? And in the early part of the day, when such things are considered, your seed will bud and sprout, sending out shoots, and that will be heaped up and held on the wrong side of the barrier for having wavered and wandered away from the Katsir harvest. You're not part of it. In the daytime, there will be terminal disease and hopelessness, infirmity, weakness, affliction, and tribulation. That's what Israel is enduring, will endure in great magnitude during the time of Yaakov's troubles, including the influence and incurable and mortal grief and mental anguish. 2 of every 3 Jews are going to die, 10 million people during this time. And I think that as it relates to humanity at large, because of the wars and all of the other things that are going to happen on this earth, it'll even be more desperate for Goyim. So God says, well, be wary of the preponderance of people from many nations who will roar in as agitated hordes and confused terrorists. Hamon. This is the double side of Abraham's name. Abraham on one side means merciful and enriching father. On the other side, it means father of these agitated and confused hordes of terrorists. Hamon. And on the positive side, he is the father of Yisrael, of the covenant family. And on the negative side, he is the father through Ishmael of Islam. Those roaring and agitated hordes of confused terrorists. The vast multitudes of bewildered and loudmouthed militants flaunting their abundance of wealth while clamoring emotionally with their worldly possessions and disorderly riots, which are extensive and excessive, similar to loudly groaning, stormy, and enraged seas. Seas are relentless. Have you ever looked at what happens with either a tsunami or in a hurricane with the tidal surge, and see that winds can be damaging, and very often are, particularly when they swirl and become embedded tornadoes. But it's the rising tide that makes hurricanes so devastating, and a tsunami is essentially unstoppable. And that's what Yahweh was saying, is this next wave, the one 2 years after 10:7 of 23, is going to be unstoppable. It's going to be like the raging sea as Muslim jihadists flood into Israel. They will choose to be constantly infuriated and uproarious, constantly snarling and angry, driven by winds of religious, political, and social desire. And then the corrupting roar of destructive societal chaos of the people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious and political leader, be Muhammad, will be like the horrible and destructive, desolating uproar of a flood, of surging seas. This is a frightening picture, Israel. That's why I was asking you to pay attention, to listen to the Zeroah. Yes, he may be verbose. Yes, he may be filled with cracks and fissures as he's gaining age. But Yahweh is working through him, and he is speaking to you. And if you avail yourselves of what I am saying, then you won't be among those caught up in this flood. Forcefully and in great numbers, capitulating to the will of another, they will continually strive to destroy, moving rapidly while creating an uproar. Yashaya, freedom is from Yahweh, Isaiah 17:12. What he's describing here is 1,000 times 10:7 of 23. The archaic people of these nations who are massing under a religious and political leader, like widespread and innumerable, horribly destructive and deadly floodwaters, will be devastating. They will be desolating. It's hard to share these words with you, Israel. It's like so many, almost all, that Yahweh has conveyed through his prophets over the last 3,400 years, or more precisely, between 3,400 years ago and 2,400 years ago, between Moshe and Malachi. You haven't listened. And time after time, you've been bludgeoned by the Egyptians, by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Macedonians, by the Imperial Romans, by the Roman Catholics, by the Ottoman Turks, by Europeans, the Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire, by the Nazis in Germany, and now by Muslims in league with progressives, over and over again. The floodwaters keep coming. And all the while, God has given you the answer, given you the opportunity to rise above these waters to board his ark to safety. And yet you continue to ignore him. And so you forced your God to endure watching you for thousands of years squander your lives when all you had to do was accept him, to rely upon him, to reach up for him, to begin by acknowledging his name, which you erased from your lives. And so these horribly destructive and deadly floodwaters, they will come. They will be devastating. They will be desolating. Ultimately, in the end, after way too many have died, Yahweh will rebuke them. And whether he rebukes them at this moment by speaking through his cold voice, his sons Bashar, his chosen Zeroah and Nachri, the Choder, whether this is now speaking of his return with his son Dod, the Messiah, who is the greatest defender of Israel, or it's in stages and it represents all three. We know he will rebuke them. He will issue a warning against them while criticizing their capitulation. And so they will be swiftly driven away, denied and deprived of what they sought, and they shall disappear, going into a distant place of alienation. You know what the distant place of alienation is, Israel? It's Sheol. And that's where they're headed. And they will be chased just like chaff on the hills before the approaching presence of the Ruach of the Spirit. And like a rolling ball of idolatrous dung, spinning like a tumbleweed in a whirlwind before the approaching presence of the storm. Out of here. You are gone. There is a time coming when there'll be no trace of the religious or religion, of militants or their weapons, of the political or their platitudes. All gone, blown away like chaff in the wind, like a rolling ball of dung. Approaching the timing of this noxious religious disorder and mixing together of the Arab awakening at sunset, then behold, terror. In the time before the dawn, and wait a minute, just so that you are clear here. The statement prior speaks of the role that Elia and I am playing in rebuking the religious who have come to attack Israel. We are the ones who warned them that this is what's going to happen to them, that they will be blown away. But we aren't there at this point to stop free will. They're going to attack, and it's only because they attack that Israel finally says, wait a minute, there's no IDF to protect us. There are no politicians to save us. The rabbis have been counterproductive. They're nowhere to be found. And so the only hope will be Yahweh. And by default, they will choose him. So it is our warning to those who would do this to say, you do this, this is going to be the consequence. You have been forewarned. Do this, and we will dispatch your sorry souls to Sheol. You can't talk reason to a religious person. They're going to attack anyway, and that's why there's going to be the signature assault of Islam. And let's be clear, when Yahweh uses the word terror, he's much smarter than I am. And I can tell you that I am disturbed when people say they, like in Israel, we eliminated a terrorist, that Hamas is a terrorist organization. This is just absolute nonsense. Terrorism is a tactic. So Hamas is not a tactic. Hamas is an Islamic organization. Jihad is Muslims perpetrating terror through this tactic. They're inferior in every way, and the only way an inferior force causes a superior being or institution to crumble is to terrorize it so that they give up, they surrender, they submit. So terrorism is a tactic. Israel's at war with Islam. Islam declared war on Israel 1,400 years ago and has been trying to annihilate Jews and exterminate the state of Israel and the existence of Jews everywhere in the world since that time. And Allah and Muhammad gloat about the mass murder of Jews throughout the Quran and Hadith, enslaving Jews throughout the Quran and Hadith. Muhammad raped Jews, women, constantly. So that's the order of things. In this time before the dawn, this large migration of asses and the consideration of such things, they are no more. And so this is a very precise prophecy. It says that this final enemy that's going to terrorize Israel is going to be comprised of Arabs, Arabians. A religious upheaval, darkness before the light. All of these things are derived from Arab. And they will bring terror. Even terror is an interesting word because it's bal aha, very similar to Allah. But in the morning, they will be no more. Now, in this particular case, what happens is that the final Lakat gleaning that we talked about, that transpires as the sun sets on Towrah, which would be the 23rd of September of 2033. But remember how not only am I left behind, but so is a physical mortal remnant of Yisrael. Well, it is then that the Adamah Parah, which was spoken of at that moment, the Parah, well, the Adamah Parah, known as the red heifer, is going to sacrifice his life to save Yisrael. And once that occurs, what's going to happen is that Eliah is going to reprise his role as the master of ceremonies, the exact same thing he did 40 Yobel 888 years earlier, when he orchestrated the events against the political and religious establishment and the roasting of a bull that had been prepared for this sacrifice. And Yahweh ignited the flames, and all around was this torrent of water. Yahweh was going to release a torrent of water from underneath the Temple Mount. He's going to ignite the flames. They're going to reach up and dance to the heavens. The water is going to fall off the Temple Mount. And on the positive side, the Israelites who are the mortal remnant are going to be purified by these flames, and they're going to be cleansed by this cascade of water, while those who had come to attack and terrorize Israel are going to be washed away and incinerated. And that's going to occur in the morning. And this is going to be a special morning of Towrah. It's a Shabat, of course, a Saturday morning, because there will be a full eclipse of the sun on this day as well. And so on that moment, they will be no more. This is the fate of those deceived by seductive words. It is the consequence of their choices, of marauders who plunder and pillage us, and of the allotment and retribution of those who seek to conquer us, carrying off the spoils of war, because they despise us. Yahweh is, of course, speaking of Islam and Islam's final assault on God's people. They will fail because collectively, Yahweh and his beloved son, Dod, his favorite master of ceremonies of all time when speaking against politicized religions, Eliah, and the man who reflects the sun's light, who serves as his Bashar, this man dressed in crimson clothes, coming from Edom to save Yisrael, the Adam of Parah, will offer the final sacrifice to save Yisrael, and Yahweh will work through that to deliver the ideal result, which is the elimination of all Muslims, all mechanisms of war, every terrorist, every jihadist, every nincompoop who would rape a Jewish woman screaming Allahu Akbar, Allah is great. Or, if you know the Hebrew, Allah is a mouse or a rat. This is what God has promised. Now with that, we move into the 18th chapter of Yeshaya. And I know we're an hour into this program. We try to limit our programs to about an hour. And I have to decide at this point, do I continue and to share this with you? Do I start a new program and then continue? But I think the answer is going to be, we've gone this far. Let's finish Yeshaya 17 and 18 and speak about what's going to occur, because the prophet told us. He said, woe to the land of whirling wings and hovering wings, which, relationally speaking, is from the region beyond the rivers and the direction of Cush. Yeshaya 18:1. What is the land that is best known for its attack helicopters, its whirling and hovering wings? Who makes the Apache? Who makes the Huey? Who makes the Black Hawk? Even the offspring. The United States. The United States has more of them than every nation on earth combined. It is the nation of whirling and hovering wings. This is important because all of this that follows is a setup for Yahweh to tell Yisrael that the country that betrays it in the end, that is responsible for dissecting Israel at the waist, severing it into two, causing it to be indefensible, is this nation, the president of this nation that he is describing. And the opening salvo is whirling and hovering wings. And it is the other direction of Cush. That means apart from the rivers of Cush. You're going to go the direction that most Israelites would look at, or rivers of Cush. If he's going to say the rivers of the great rivers, then he would be looking east towards Mesopotamia and would be speaking of Muslims. But he's not. He's going the other direction. And of course, that nation in the other direction is the United States. He would go on to say, it dispatches weapons of war by the sea, along with envoys. Who's the envoy in Israel today? Yeah, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, who was there even before Israel invaded Gaza. Former Secretary of State Vulcan. Of course, right after he met with MBS of Saudi Arabia to give Israel what they could and could not do. Dispatching weapons of war by the sea, the United States has 13 aircraft carrier battle groups. The next nation has 2. And one U.S. battle group is 10 times more potent than the 2 of any other nation. No nation in world history has projected its force more by sea than the United States. And if you're still thinking about those whirling wings, the U.S. Navy has more pilots than the U.S. Air Force. Yes, we, as Americans, and I say we only because my passport still says America. I grew up in America. I live in an island in the middle of the Caribbean now. But it dispatches its weapons of war by the sea. The more you can disassociate from America based upon what I'm sharing with you, the better, along with its envoys. The only nation that was close to the United States in the way that it used its military prowess and its envoys to establish influence and control around the world, only one. That's in all of human history. There's only one nation that is even remotely similar to the way the United States operates. And it isn't Rome, which the United States copied by having Capitol Hill and the Senate and Republic and all of this sort of thing. No, because the Romans invaded these areas and they established their military presence by conquering all of these people. The one that controlled currency, they were the reserve currency of their age, that controlled all trade and that used their navy and remote ports to influence the world the way the United States does, the model the United States has followed. Carthage, which was known as Tarshish at this time in the text. And so, in swift floating vessels over the surface of the waters, because of the presence of the floodwaters, because of the presence of these invading Muslim hordes, the messengers traveled swiftly, indulgently, inappropriately, trivializing the complexity of the situation while disregarding the consequences. Boy, is that ever a perfect prophecy to describe the insanity of what Donald Trump unleashed 2 weeks ago when he said he was going to turn Gaza into resorts and that he was going to move 2.2 million Gazans out and give them emerald cities in Egypt and in Jordan, which is pure insanity. Not only will it not happen, not only would it be impossible to make happen, if it were to happen, it would be Israel's worst nightmare, because without fences around them, without the IDF being able to control what goes in to them, and with them metastasizing around other young Muslim jihadists, what you'll have happen if that were to occur is that 2.1 million Jordanians who still identify themselves as exiles from Fakistan, with the million that will be added to them, will have unlimited access to weapons. And now you've got 3 million jihadists coming in from the east. And then you would have another million joining with probably 1 million Egyptians, all armed to the teeth because Israel couldn't keep them from having arms, coming in from the west. It's 1,000-fold. 10-7, and you haven't even talked about what's coming down from the south, from Turkey and Syria and Lebanon, or up from the north, or up from the south, and the Sudan and Somalia, Ethiopia, and Saudi Arabia. Mother of all wars, to coin a phrase of Saddam Hussein. This is what would happen. So he knows what he has said is insane. But since he's a crazy dude, the Islamic heads of state are saying, holy mother of Kaaba, we have a problem. We need the Fakistanians to stay in Fakistan so they can attack Jews. Every time we've taken them and brought them into our countries, they've tried to bring us down. These people are impossible. The only thing that they're good for is killing Jews. We can't have them in our countries. And so by saying this craziness, Trump has put them into a position where what MBS wants to do is to impose the two-state dissolution of Israel in a way that the jihadi Muslims don't kill him. Because if he normalizes relationships with Israel without being able to tell the jihadi Muslims, I only do this in the spirit of Hudabayah to make Israel more vulnerable so that we could wipe Israel off the face of the earth, he's a dead man walking. He has said so, and he knows it. And he knows he has the United States by the coconuts, because all he has to do is formally go to BREC, say, I don't care what currency except for our oil, we'll sell it in any currency. Ruples, if you want ruples, no problem. Yen, bring it on. He doesn't care. And if that were to happen, the United States is no longer the universal reserve currency, and our debt becomes crippling and we can't fund it. And the U.S. economy craters, and every economist knows it. That's how close the United States is, and the one lever that holds it all is MBS in Saudi Arabia. And so he has ultimate negotiating power over Trump, plus the fact he's already proven that he can buy Trump. Do you think he gave $2 billion to Trump's son-in-law? $2 billion. It's a big bribe to Kirshner. Think he gave $2 billion to Kirshner? Just for giggles? At the same time, how much do you think he actually gave through back channels to Donald Trump? And how much he's promised to give beyond that? If you want to have a clue, think of just the lowly Witkoff, the golfing buddy that Trump positioned to his lead envoy for the Middle East, that spanked Israel into capitulating on this last round and dealing with the devil and giving as much as 100 murderous jihadists just to get their own emaciated people back per person. The Kuwaitis, they bribed Wycliffe with $623 million. It's all public record. He was paying a debt, serving Israel up on a silver platter, one paid for by the Kuwaitis. This is a really bad situation. And God's telling you, this is the man who's going to capitulate, who's going to be bribed, who's going to be cajoled, who will be owned and operated by the Saudi Arabians. And all of this chaos that this speaks of, these insane notions that are going to be postured by this nation, are all going to end up at this point. I plastered over the last 2 days X with probably 100 posts explaining this. Pictures, drawings, accounts. What's going to happen? It's right here in the prophecy, isn't it? This is the fate of those deceived by seductive words, and the consequence of their choices, of the marauders who plunder and pillage us, and the allotment and retribution of those who seek to conquer us, carrying off the spoils of war because they despise us. And now we have in the 17th chapter, we're reading the same thing over again. And so in floating vessels over the surface of the waters, because of the presence of the floodwaters, there's the presence of these Muslims. The messengers travel swiftly, indulgently, inappropriately, trivializing the complexity of the situation while disregarding the consequences. Resorts in Gaza, emerald cities for Fakistanians, peace in our time, normalization of the relationship between Islam and Israel. This on behalf of a nation of people from different races and places, the ultimate melting pot, the United States, who are wont to constantly take the lead, again, the United States, directing others, the United States, extending their reach and their influence, the United States, more than any other nation in human history. They are scrubbed clean. They are smooth skinned. They are shaven, yet reckless, with weapons both sharpened and gleaming. These people are frightening and they're feared, even dreadful, while at the same time respected for their awesome power from here to there and beyond in some future time. Written 2,700 years ago. This population, which is comprised of many different races, routinely spews out nonsense and a stream of foreign language, talking down to others who continually march off to war based on their condescending and moronic rhetoric, acting like a great power, all of which deserves to be mocked and ridiculed. I've done my best. They are always trying to expand and impose their influence, even their faith, establishing the rules while senselessly drawing lines in the sand, eagerly throwing others out of their land. It aggressively conquers and subdues, trampling people down and kicking them out. This country is divided by rivers. Of course, the United States is more divided by rivers than any other nation on earth. All of you who inhabit this perverted earth, and also those who remain and dwell in the land. When the Nesh sign is a very inside thing to Yashayah. It is written by the Choder, who he introduces in the 11th chapter, who is inspired by the seven spirits. And it is this very message that I am revealing to you now that is uplifted. So the Nesh sign and banner, the means to effectively gain the people's attention and to communicate with them so that they can be rallied to the point of action, drawing them together so that they engage and for the first time are productive, conveying important information conspicuously throughout this community. Well, that Nesh, he says, will be lifted up. And it will be shown on high from above because Yahweh is working with him. Its purpose will be for you all to become perceptive, for you to look at it, for you to witness what's written on it. And also, when the shofar is blown, when it is sound, shofar blows on Shabuah, it blows again on Towrah. The entire purpose of what we do is to blow the shofar. You look at my calling card that I post all over Facebook and again on X. It is of the shofar. Towrah is the mikra of the shofar. And when that shofar sounds, signaling the warning, listen. Damn Israel. Why have you been so hard-headed? What do you have against listening to Yahweh, listening to his prophets, listening to his chosen implements speak to you? This is what's headed your way. Do you want to drown in these floodwaters, or do you want to jump aboard the ark? You're being invited aboard. Indeed, because here and now, at this point in time, is what Yahweh said to me. I will choose to be silent, and I will be tranquil, undisturbed and inactive, electing to be absent from the troubled strife of war. He's saying to Israel, when war comes, and this is 1,000 times what happened on 10/7. And it will begin when Israel is thinned at the waist, made vulnerable, attacked from the inside out and the outside in. That Yahweh is not going to come to your defense. All you're going to have at the very best is a couple of witnesses warning those who would attack you, trying to protect you, trying to awaken you, trying to get you to jump aboard the ark before it's too late, the Ark of the Covenant. Yahweh's not going to intervene at that time. He's not going to intervene until Towrah, at the end of the time of Jacob's troubles. And then he will intervene in a mighty way. Then I will thoughtfully choose what to observe, electing to respond appropriately. So it's not like God says, I'm just going to run away. No, he has two witnesses there. He has a lot vested in those two men, Elia and Yada. And he's going to be certain that he pays attention to what they do, because he's going to be empowering them, inspiring them, protecting them, enabling them. So he will choose to observe what he thinks is important in my place, he says, in the manner of a radiant and glowing, passionate warmth of the Almighty's light. He will be brilliant in Shamaim and the seventh dimension, and yet he will allow some of that light to shine through us as we are his last illuminating witnesses on behalf of his people. Then he says, and it will be similar to an enveloping cloud of encompassing mist, providing an abundance of prosperity. In Zechariah 12, where Yahweh says he's going to pour onto Jerusalem a spirit of compassion and mercy, and then those in Jerusalem are going to see Yahweh return alongside the one whom they pierced, Dod, and they're going to weep like they would weep for a firstborn, because Dod is the firstborn. Yahweh is saying, I am going to return. And when he returns, he's going to be like an enveloping cloud of encompassing mist, providing an abundance of prosperity in the warmth and enthusiasm of the harvest, the katsir, that is associated with the branch, the choder as the branch, the final zeroah. Indeed, before approaching the presence of the harvest associated with the branch, katsir, as the budding shoots form and are perfected, then the hardened and upfit sour grapes, well, those who are not receptive, those who remain sour, are going to be dealt with for having been quarrelsome and rebellious filth. Israel, read the story of the Exodus. You were quarrelsome from the beginning. You were rebellious right from the beginning, and it never ended. You're quarrelsome, embittered, and rebellious now. You're sourpusses. If you don't change, you're going to die this way. 3,400 years ago, you told God to go away. You never wanted to hear from him again. There's nothing to be gained by that. That was stupid. Are you going to be stupid all the way to the end? Or are you finally going to wake up and make a change? Listen, I understand that most of you aren't going to listen, but some of you will. The Yahweh blog is for you. I'm reintroducing you to Yahweh's name. I'm reintroducing you to the covenant, to the Moed Mikre, to your Messiah and King Dod, to the timeline, to your opportunity. He continues, therefore, the vile and worthless who squander their opportunity by trivializing it will be cut off, severed, and excluded by way of a pruning hook. Lopped off. Then with regard to the forsaken castaways, they will be dragged away and removed, cut off and separated. Yashayah, Isaiah 18:5. There's no coming back at that point. You will have missed the final opportunity. You will be lopped off the vine that is productive and represents the best of Yisrael. And you need to know that. The continuation of the status quo, being religious, being political, being militant, being conspiratorial, you will become castaways. You will be karat, cut off and separated. And they will be continually abandoned and forsaken. Azab, written in the imperfect, which means damned forevermore. This is a time, unlike other times, where if a Israelite chose to be among the vast majority and chose to be recalcitrant, rebellious, malcontent against Yahweh, embittered, that at the end of their lives, their souls would simply dissipate into nothingness. They were given an opportunity, they squandered it, and that's just it. But now with everything riding on it, with Yahweh's return to his people, and with all of the carnage going on in the world, and all of the people of the world rising up against his, that option appears to be off the table. That means if you aren't amongst those who have embraced Yahweh by name, have acknowledged that Dod is the Messiah, the returning king, and the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, upon which you're capitalizing. If you don't meet Yahweh on the day prescribed because you know what it represents and when it's going to occur, if you don't avail yourself at this point of the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, you will be perceived as being against God and his people. And being against God and his people is to be damned forever. Azab in the imperfect conjugation. All together, completely, all at once, as if they were all alike. The religious, the political, the conspiratorial, the militant. The approaching birds of prey from the high places represent the beasts of the earth. And the birds of prey and all of the beasts of the material realm will be among and against them during the autumn and winter, continually ridiculing and taunting them for actually being irrational and consistently confused. Yeshayah 18:6. At this time, it shall be delivered forcefully in a straightforward manner, as a tribute, as a gift, which is born out of reverence and respect for the relationship unto Yahweh of the vast array of the spiritual implements. The gift. At this time, it's the man from Edom. Yasha in John, the 61st chapter, told you about him. And he's going to arrive as the Adam of Parah. And he's going to offer the gift of his corporeal body to prepare and to cleanse this remnant of Israel. It is the gift of this time, just as Dod's sacrifice of Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim was the gift of the time 40 Yobel previous to this. And then, at this time, it shall be delivered in a straightforward manner, as a tribute, as a gift, which is born out of reverence and respect for the relationship unto Yahweh of the vast array of spiritual implements. These people are wont to constantly direct others to extend their influence. And now he goes on, and he will speak more of the menacing nature of America that has brought the need for this sacrifice, this final resolution for God's people. He says they are scrubbed clean, they are smooth-skinned and shaven, yet typically reckless with their weapons sharpened and gleaming. They are a people and a nation which is frightening and feared, even dreadful, while at the same time respected for their awesome power. They are from here to there and beyond in a future time. This Gentile nation is comprised of many races, and it routinely spews out nonsense in a strange foreign language, talking down to others while continually marching off to war based upon their condescending and moronic rhetoric, acting like a great power, all of which deserves to be mocked and ridiculed. Always trying to expand and impose its influence, even its faith, establishing the rules while senselessly drawing lines in the sand, eagerly throwing others out of their land. Actually, Doesn't even say there in this point. I think I put it in because it flows better in English. But as it relates to the fake Twistianians, it's not their land, and they will be throwing them out, but eagerly throwing people out of the land. It aggressively conquers and subdues, trampling people down. So from a relationship with a country whose land is divided by rivers, to the place to take a stand in the name of Yahowah, of the vast array of spiritual messengers. That place is Mount Zion, where the signs are posted along the way between Dod's home in the city of Dod and Yahowah's home at the top of Moriah. His watchmen are blind, speaking of Yisrael. They are all ignorantly opposed to Yada, who's the man bringing you this message. And yet, Yahowah is saying that the political and religious leadership of Israel is blind. It appears so if you look at the last few years. He says they're dumb as dogs, and it's not because Yahowah doesn't like dogs. Caleb was one of the 2 men allowed into the promised land of the original group that started the Exodus. And dog actually means all heart. They are all dumb dogs without the capacity to understand or the ability to prevail. He's calling them animals, in other words, without a conscience. They're barking and howling, panting while dreaming, lying around smitten with their inactivity, with a complete lack of awareness. Well, we move past actually Yeshaya 18 into the section I'm going to share with you on another program in the 56th and 57th chapters of Yeshaya, leading to the 61st, which we have mentioned. But this is where we are, Israel. This is where you are. This is what is happening. This is what's going to happen. There should be no surprises. You're very smart people. It's time you figure it out. And the first step in that direction is to accept Yahowah's name and to reacquaint yourself with Dod as the Messiah, Son of God, and the returning King of Yisrael. Understand the timing and who is doing what to whom. I thank you for listening. This has been a special edition of the Yahowah blog, speaking of this amazing time of troubles for Yisrael. And I am Yada, Craig Winn.